Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're a professional woman today, especially if you're juggling like high expectations at work and managing everything at home, well, you've probably felt that impossible squeeze, that constant, almost nagging feeling that maybe you're doing way too much for everyone else and maybe not quite enough for yourself.
Yeah, that feeling is so common. Utter exhaustion, sometimes self-doubt. It's exactly what Lulu tackles in her book, It's Not Too Late in Your Thirties, Life Management for Independent Women.
Mm.
She explicitly wrote it for women who are, as she puts it, doubting their strength or just feeling totally overwhelmed by complaints, responsibilities.
Hmm.
And the mission isn't just about, coping or surviving. It's really about finding what she calls spiritual order and figuring out how to genuinely accumulate strength.
Okay, that already sounds deeper than just tips and tricks. I like that she starts by defining the stakes. It seems like the book really zeroes in on this modern dilemma, calling this the most helpless and torn era for women. That's quite a statement.
It is, and it's a really insightful sociological point, I think. Women, especially over the last century or so, have fought for and gained really essential rights and capabilities,
Yeah.
education, careers, income.
Right. All the things we associate with progress.
Exactly. But here's the paradox she points out. Women gained all these new responsibilities, these external ones, without necessarily shedding the traditional burdens. So now the expectation is often that you have to be, a top-tier professional and somehow also embody this ideal of the perfect wife and mother handling everything internally. That's often unsustainable.
Yeah, that equation just doesn't add up, does it? So, for you listening, our goal today is really to unpack this core contradiction that Lulu brings up, this tension between, on the one hand, wanting fierce independence, and on the other, feeling that deep cultural pull towards maybe a more comfortable dependency. The book calls it the small woman mentality. We want to explore how that conditioning kind of keeps us stuck, and importantly, how we might define a path out.
Absolutely. And to really do that, Luder says we have to start with the foundations, the sort of hidden barriers.
Yeah.
Before you can even think about growth or ambition, she insists you need to understand the cultural conditioning, millennia of it, really. She pinpoints four major gender constraints that basically tell women, psychologically, to, well, seek protection and maybe stay small.
Okay, let's break those down because they sound so familiar, almost like common sense sometimes, but when you look closely, they're actually quite damaging, aren't they?
They're incredibly powerful because they're often invisible. So the first one is this deep-seated idea that women are inherently weak. Now, okay, there might be some biological differences in physical strength, but socially this gets translated into this idea of intellectual or comprehensive weakness. And that leads directly to wanting or feeling you need protection and dependency, often from a male partner.
Right. And the second constraint that feels related, the idea that women are secondary, we see that play out in tiny ways every day, don't we? These small acts of self-sacrifice.
Constantly. It's the habit of prioritizing the perceived resource provider, usually the man. Think about how often a woman might say and genuinely mean, oh, you have the bigger piece, I'm fine, or you take the good seat, really, I don't mind.
Mm.
This kind of habitual self-effacement means her needs consistently come second. It just reinforces that auxiliary role.
And the next two seem to tap into something even heavier social control, moral judgment. That feels like it cuts even deeper into self-worth.
It does. Constraint 3 is women are presumed guilty. Lulu argues that society holds women to a much harsher standard for moral or social slip-ups. Think about public reactions to conflicts or infidelity cases. Often the focus, the blame, lands on the female victim or the other woman rather than necessarily the man who might bear responsibility. The weight of moral failure just falls heavier on women.
That's a huge burden to carry. But let me just push back a tiny bit on the first one, the inherent weakness idea. If independence means taking risks and responsibility, isn't some caution actually sensible? How does the book distinguish between smart self-protection and this kind of limiting dependency?
That's a really key distinction. Lulu isn't arguing against being cautious or sensible. She's targeting habitual dependency, the mindset that you cannot generate your own safety or value. When a woman internalizes that, she starts measuring her own success not by her achievements, but by the strength of her protector. And this ties directly into constraint 4. A woman's greatest value is fertility. This suggests her ultimate worth isn't defined by what she builds or creates herself, but by her ability to produce children, often specifically a son, to carry on a patrilineal line. It reduces her identity to being a vessel, not an independent creator.
Wow. Okay, when you lay out those four historical rules like that, you can really see why that dependency fantasy might feel appealing, even if consciously we want independence. Craving that seemingly easier, protected life of the small woman. What exactly is the pull of that mentality? Why is it so sticky?
Well, the appeal is primarily emotional safety, I think, and lowered expectations. The fantasy isn't just about, say, not having to work. It's this deeper idea that a capable master, the husband figure, will handle everything difficult. He'll shield her from the harsh realities of external competition, the messy parts of the world. She operates in this like low-risk bubble, and her success is measured by his achievements.
But the trade-off is huge.
Massive. Comfort comes at the cost of having zero real leverage, zero independent value in the wider world.
Which brings us perfectly to the second core concept. The need to redefine what true equality and value creation actually mean. You mentioned the historical man external, woman internal idea needs unpacking.
Yes, because historically that division wasn't necessarily about inequality of value. Think about the classic agricultural model. Male farming, female weaving.
Mm.
The man worked externally, creating surplus food, maybe generating wealth that way. The woman worked internally, creating surplus cloth, also generating wealth or resources. The key thing is, both activities created equally leveraged surplus value, value that could be traded, that had capital potential.
Okay, so both were contributing economically in tangible ways. What shifted in the modern economy then?
Well, generally speaking, men continued to create that external leveraged value income, status, networks, things recognized by the market. But women, often held back by those constraints we talked about being secondary, the focus on fertility frequently ended up managing only the internal side. Childcare, household logistics, emotional labor, all incredibly important for the family unit, absolutely essential. But crucially, this internal work doesn't typically generate surplus value that she can independently leverage in the external market.
Ah, I see. So if one partner stops creating that external tradable value, the power dynamic shifts dramatically. The relationship becomes imbalanced no matter how hard she's working inside the home.
Exactly. It's about leverage and market recognition, not just effort.
So the solution the book proposes is, well, it's pretty direct then. Female independence requires creating value that can actually compete with male value. And that's defined by market leverage, not just how busy you are.
Precisely. And Lulu is clear, this doesn't mean everyone needs to be a CEO or earn millions, but it does mean creating comparable value. Maybe it's income, maybe it's professional visibility, maybe it's influential networks, social capital, something tangible.
Yeah.
And achieving that takes sustained time, focused effort, accumulating experience, things that fundamentally require looking beyond the protective walls of the home.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because the book argues the main barrier isn't actually a lack of ability. Modern women are often highly educated, skilled.
Incredibly well equipped, yes.
The real barrier, she says, is the third concept, embracing ambition. Or in the original Chinese, yesin.
Yes, and this is crucial. Lulu believes many capable women get stuck right at the step of daring to admit they have ambition. And the cultural context of yesin is key here. It's not quite the same as ambition in a purely positive Western sense of drive, especially when applied to women in many, say, Chinese cultural contexts. It can carry negative weight. It can imply excessive greed or being selfish, maybe betraying the expected focus on collective or family harmony.
So there's a kind of subtle societal policing. Men are encouraged to be ambitious, to strive, but women who show the same drive might be labeled, what, ruthless, uncaring, neglecting their real duties.
That's often the underlying message, yes. And this internal conflict, this fear of being negatively labeled, translates directly into that habitual low self-esteem we sometimes see professionally. The book uses that really poignant example of Assistant H. She's highly educated, clearly competent. Maybe you can share that anecdote.
Yeah, it was striking. She was good at her job, but before starting any complex task, she had this habit. She'd almost automatically say something like, I might fail, please don't blame me if this goes wrong. Or she'd defer decisions to a male colleague, T, who maybe wasn't even more experienced, just male.
Mhm.
Always seeking that external, okay, that reassurance beforehand. It's like a verbal message of self-deprecation.
And that locks her in, right? A low risk, low reward loop.
Yeah.
Because you rarely see male colleagues preface their work with that level of immediate, upfront apology for potentially failing. That learned behavior is a direct result of internalizing constraint, one that underlying belief that maybe she's inherently weaker or less capable and needs to preemptively manage expectations downwards. It actively stops her from seeking bigger roles or demanding recognition for her actual skills.
It's quite profound how these internal blocks manifest. Let's shift a bit now to the emotional side, the everyday reality. Why does the book suggest modern women feel perpetually behind, stressed out, this time anxiety disorder?
Lulu argues women often suffer more intensely from this because they're conditioned to uphold these impossibly high and frankly often outdated domestic standards.
Yeah.
There's sometimes this underlying belief, for instance, that hand-washing clothes is somehow morally superior to using a machine, or that scrubbing floors on your knees shows you're a better mother than using, efficient modern tools.
Right, this insistence on maintaining these really exhaustive, maybe unnecessary standards, it creates this absolutely packed, unsustainable schedule, doesn't it? It forces them into living these double lives.
Hmm.
One life for the demanding job, the professional identity, and another completely separate one for this idealized, often historically rooted domestic manager role.
And that pressure feeds directly back into career choices. Lulu points out that in today's competitive market, many married women end up evaluating jobs primarily on factors like, is it close to home? Are the hours flexible? Is there enough time off? They prioritize criteria that serve the internal logistics. Meanwhile, things critical for long-term career growth like advancement potential, the company's future, challenging projects, they often become secondary concerns.
And by doing that, by prioritizing the domestic sphere in their career choices, they inadvertently ensure they can't easily ascend to leadership. It traps them further in that home mother role. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, reinforcing the initial constraint.
Exactly, it becomes a cycle. And this connects to a really powerful cultural comparison Lulu makes regarding International Women's Day. She observes that in China, the day often becomes 3/8 Queen's Day. It's dominated by commercial things, sales on cosmetics, manicures, maybe flowers from the boss, a half day off.
Okay, I mean, on the surface, that sounds nice. Maybe a welcome break from that crushing schedule we just talked about. Is it really so bad to accept a bit of pampering?
Well, that's precisely where the critique comes in. Lou shares a story about her French friend, Mumu, who was apparently quite angered by this Queen's Day approach. Mumu's argument was that this kind of excessive protection, treating women like queens needing gifts and leisure for a day, is actually a subtle form of discrimination. It infantilizes women. Mumu felt the day should be for serious discussion about systemic issues, pay gaps, the lack of women in leadership, political representation, reproductive rights, the hard stuff.
That's a challenging perspective. So the French view, by focusing on the systemic, the structural inequalities, and not prioritizing beauty or leisure on that specific day, that's seen as a higher form of respect.
Yes. It treats women as capable adults whose time and energy on that day are valuable for addressing real social and political issues, not just for consumption or rest. The logic being you have 364 other days for self-care and leisure. International Women's Day demands serious thought, serious action, not just being told you deserve pretty things because you're a woman.
That really reframes it. Okay, let's bring this towards some takeaways. According to Lulu, if women want to break free from these cycles, the path forward involves active choice and maybe some radical self-prioritization. How does the book suggest moving beyond feeling defined solely by marriage and family?
A key point she makes is that marriage and family are important, yes, but they are just parts of a whole life, not the entire definition of self. The critical action she advocates is learning to rank life's demands according to your own needs and goals. It's not about constantly feeling forced into these impossible binary choices like, do I save my career project or delete my kid's extracurricular activity?
Right, that feeling of always having to sacrifice something crucial. So what does ranking look like practically? Can you give an example?
Okay, so instead of that agonizing save or delete dilemma, you might proactively decide. Right now, establishing my professional credibility is rank 1 for me. Ensuring my family feels secure and emotionally supported is rank 2. My personal fitness goals are rank 3. Having that clear hierarchy allows you to allocate your time and energy based on your defined priorities, not just reacting to external pressures. If a new demand conflicts with rank 1, you consciously adjust ranks 2 or 3. It's about making intentional trade-offs rather than feeling perpetually guilty about every compromise.
That sounds empowering, actually, taking control of the priorities. And underpinning all of this, as we discussed, needs to be genuine confidence, which the book says is often undermined by those ingrained constraints.
That's absolutely foundational. And the book offers a really liberating perspective on confidence. It's not some innate gift you either have or don't. It's not magic talent. It is simply an accumulation of positive experiences, positive results, and positive reinforcement. She suggests the visible difference in confidence between many men and women isn't innate ability, but often the sheer quantity of encouragement and positive feedback they received growing up and in their early careers.
Okay, so if confidence is something you build, like a stockpile, How do you actively build it? Especially if you're starting from that place of habitual self-doubt, like Assistant H.
Lulu gives some really practical advice here. One key step is to consciously cheer for every small progress. Don't wait for the huge win. Set small, manageable goals that are just slightly outside your comfort zone, just a bit above your current baseline difficulty. Then, when you achieve them, and you will, because they're designed to be achievable, you actively acknowledge and celebrate that success. By creating this constant stream of micro successes, this fertile ground of small wins, you systematically build self-trust. You literally retrain your brain to expect competence, escaping that ingrained habit of low self-esteem.
So it's about creating evidence for your own capability, brick by brick. Connecting all these ideas, the conditioning, the value creation, the ambition, the confidence building, the really big takeaway seems to be realizing that you have the power to define who you are. It's not solely dictated by the role society or family might expect you to play. You get to ask yourself, okay, beyond the labels, what is my true self? And maybe more importantly, what roles do I choose to play versus the ones I feel obligated to play?
Exactly. That conscious choice. The choice to create external value, to own your ambition, to prioritize yourself based on your own ranking. That is the path to genuine dignity and balance, according to Lulu. Because, as the book implies, the woman who passively accepts the role of the protected, dependent small woman will likely always find the scales of life subtly tipped against her. Real balance, real equality in partnership and in life only truly comes when you are willing and able to bring comparable, leverage value to the table in every domain you choose to participate in.
A really powerful message, especially for anyone feeling that modern squeeze. Perhaps the greatest growth comes from realizing you don't need to wait for permission from a partner, a boss, society to define your own worth and pursue your own ambitions. Thank you for digging into this with us today. That was really insightful.
My pleasure. It's important stuff to talk about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.